everyone, and welcome to our first edition of Security Chats. I'm Joe Miller. I'm from the Microsoft Security Response Center, and I focus on both external and internal research submissions tied to Microsoft's AI products and services, and work on mitigating vulnerabilities in that space. As we head towards zero-day quests, like Lynn mentioned, I'm very excited to sit down with someone I work with regularly, not just a submitter of unique vulnerabilities to the MSRC, but also as a key contributor to mitigation efforts across some of our most critical Office products. So joining me today is Estevam Arantes, one of our standout internal researchers whose work consistently delivers high impact findings, including work captured in CVEs. And in this 30-minute session, we'll dive into Estevam's approach to research, sort of from spotting opportunities to navigating some challenges and uncovering insights. And whether you're new to security, participated in zero-day quests in the past, or just looking for to sharpen your skills, should be a good discussion with something for everybody. So while we chat, I'm going to leave up resources slides so you can check out links to our past sessions. You'll also be able to find some information on Bounty and other helpful content, and a link where you can submit your own unique research to our researcher portal if you have that. So I'll leave that up there. Here you go. And so with that, we'll dive right into it. We'll get started. Estevam, it's super great to have you here. If you want, you can kick us off with a little bit of background about yourself and how you got into security research.
Sounds good. Thank you, Joe. Well, my name is Estevam. I'm originally from Brazil, but now I live in the US working for Microsoft. I've been here for 4 years now, doing security since 2015-ish. More specifically, I really got into it in 2017. While I was in university, I started doing CTFs, and then from then on, I just naturally progressed into security research and trying real-world targets, and continue to develop my skills and continue to find new things and learn more about a bit of everything. So I think that's the high-level view. I've been working on a few different companies, but Microsoft is my main company. I would say I've been here for almost 4 years now, so hopefully staying for a long time.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we're happy to have you. Yeah. So we'll kick it off with just kind of a baseline of how do you identify promising areas for security research and opportunities where you see gaps or sort of any patterns that you look for, just basically how you identify your research opportunities?
I feel like for me, there's 3 different ways one can go at identifying research and targets, and I do a little bit of all 3 of them. One of them is by focusing on specific vulnerability types. So for example, if I learn everything about cross-site scripting, I can find cross-site scripting where other people might not. So this means I would have broad range of targets and then would try the same type of vulnerability, of course, with variations on all of them. This means that I go deeper on one specific type of vulnerability, and then this allows me to find that same type in many places. A different way that I also do research is by focusing on one specific target. So for example, I want to learn about Office or Word more specifically even. So what I would do is I go into the product and I become a specialist on that individual product. So I learn everything there is to know about that individual product. I read all the documentation. I implement what there is to be implemented. And then I try to pretend initially that I'm a developer. Then I dive into the security research existing for that one product. Then from then on, you become the specialist on that product, and then keep going deeper on a specific product, but finding a broad range of vulnerabilities. And then the third type would be focusing on new products, which is always interesting because sometimes they do have good security coverage and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they didn't have the needed level that other people would say it's necessary. So that's a good opportunity because it hasn't had a lot of research on it and it doesn't have specialists on it yet. So one option is to become a specialist on that, and the other one is to always jump from new product to new product. Because I work in the Office security team, my day job is to hack Office, right? So I tend to mix a little bit of, I'm a specialist in Office products, so I know most things I need to know about Office. Of course, there's still a lot to learn because it's a massive software. But then I also need to learn about new features that are being launched all the time. And at the same time, I still want to do research, right? So I want to learn about specific vulnerabilities and then go deep into all of the Office suite and then try to find more and more of those specific types and a little bit of everything. So realistically, it's a combination of those three things. Each researcher finds the best that works for themselves. I find that most people have a combination of the three, but some are very specialist in one of the three. So that's usually how I go at it. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Kind of a follow-up question on that. Some of our researchers have given feedback that with AI research, that documentation, that's a common trend that we see people really diving deep into documentation to learn how a product is supposed to work. And some of our researchers have said that in across the industry, that AI documentation on products is behind the product release. Have you found any sort of struggles with there not being enough documentation and sort of AI products and services almost being like a black box?
Yes, that is very common, and I wouldn't say it's specific to AI, but it's happening a lot with AI because things are going on very fast. So with any product that moves fast, that's naturally something that will occur. But that's also a good thing for security researchers because if it's harder to go into a product, it means there will be less people going into it. So it's the bright and the dark side of it, right? Because of course the ramp up will be longer and it will be a little harder to understand the product. So what you can do is try to understand what are the things that are similar with those products that with the ones you've already touched and the ones that are new, what are the things that you as a developer, if you were developing that thing, what would you do? And what are the common pitfalls that you could fall on? So that's one thing that I particularly think it's important is knowing how to develop a product. Of course, you don't need to be a specialist, but knowing some level of development is important so that you understand what could go wrong, even if you don't have all the documentation describing the ins and outs of products. And that's very applicable for AI research as well, because if you're building an agent, how would you hook it to the existing APIs? How would you hook it to other systems? How would you like make sure that agent is secure? Like, what are the defenses in depth that you would add, and how can they be bypassable? So those things, it's like you don't necessarily need documentation for those. Of course, it helps, but then you can use that to your advantage and go into a target that might be considered a little harder, but then it might be higher risk, higher rewards as well.
Awesome. I like that. I like the sort of competitive mindset that you take to it of it's a pioneering space and you can use it as an advantage. There'll be less competition. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I think that
yeah.
one thing that is interesting is that capture the flags or CTFs that I briefly mentioned earlier, they have this competitive mindset and in features that sometimes like no one has ever used or architectures that are custom to the system and like the things that don't even exist in real life. So you need to learn during the competition in a very limited time. So doing that type of skill is also good to learn this type of thing. So you learn during the CTF something that is super new and that might not be directly applicable to your research, but you're also developing that skill of understanding a system where you don't necessarily have all the resources and all the documentation for it.
Very cool. The next question I have is sort of about your workflow and your process. This is a big one that a lot of researchers, it's very unique. Everybody seems to have their own workflow, but it's always really fascinating to hear from researchers what their typical workflow is from like their idea all the way to reporting, and if there's any sort of like if it's fluid and it's not the same every time. Kind of what's your take?
Yeah, I think mine is not super fluid. I try to go at it on a generic way. I usually start with a goal. So I usually start with, let's say for compiler research, for example, I want to get a data exfiltration bug. That's what I want to find. I want to find a way to do a user data exfiltration. So from there, I try to see, okay, what are the ways I could possibly get a user data exfiltration? And here I'm not talking about any existing vulnerability, but just generically, is that I would just go, okay, what are the functionalities that could be implemented in a way that give me a data exfiltration? And then once you find a functionality, you try to learn about the functionality and then eventually find a bug in that functionality. But more often than not, there will be other defense in depth things like CSP and other mitigations that the product teams have implemented So I usually try to work by isolating each part of the system as best as I can, and then going backwards from that. Some people prefer the opposite approach, as in like you try the payloads first, and then if it sticks, then you see what you get from that. I usually try to think of, I want to get this thing. I want you to leak a token. I want you to leak user data, or I want you to do something else uh, on my target. And then from there, I try to think of the things that I could potentially do to find that leak, for example, right? So I go backwards and then bypassing one mitigation at a time, because if you try to bypass everything at once, chances are you might fail and then you would get frustrated. So if you do get frustrated, then it's good to like break it down and take one step at a time so that we find what's going on and like have a more steady progress in the research. And it also gives you that like little hit of dopamine that helps you keep going, instead of having to get, okay, I have to start from the beginning. I need to paste 1,000 payloads, and then whatever sticks, you need to go from one of them, and then you need to like look at the results, but sometimes it won't be easy to automate, and then it's harder for me to go like that. So if I go backwards, it's a little easier to find especially novel vulnerabilities and vulnerability chains, because sometimes you find something that is not super applicable, but then you put that on the side and then you try to find something else to chain with that, and then with that you get something that is very impactful and a high impact vulnerability.
Awesome, that makes sense. And then you kind of mentioned sort of data exfil as a target. I like that mindset of you have a target objective, and then you'll sort of do whatever it takes to get to that. I like that. It's like spear fishing, right? And then so for that though, when you're looking for these sort of lanes, do you build on the work of others? Do you have any research that researchers or anybody that you kind of leverage to give you inspiration for these targets? Or yeah, how does that work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think building on the work of others is one of the most important things in the security field. So not only uh, getting from the others, but also contributing from the others. And it's like a back and forth process, because in security, I wouldn't say one specific person that I always go to and like I always read, but there's many, many researchers that I follow through X or Twitter, and then through all the conference talks. So I'm always watching conference talks from Black Hat, DEF CON, CCC, Blue Hat, many other conference talks that are made available online. Like you find something. One thing that does help me, and this is a tip that most people don't know, if you have a YouTube account, for example, you can create a separate account under the same email, so you can have multiple accounts. And what I do is I have a YouTube account only for conference talks. So I do watch conference talks on that account, which makes it easier for YouTube to recommend me new talks that are interesting for me, and like that are somewhat related to the topic. And sometimes it does land onto like developer talks that have nothing to do with security, but because I watch those developer talks, I learn about the product from a different lens that most security researchers might not be looking at. So it's important to learn a lot from other people. Security is one of those fields that you always need to be kind of up to date. Of course, there's difference based on security because security is such a huge field. But especially with AI coming up, there's so much going on that you need to be learning from other people's presentations, learning from other people's blog posts. Of course, always take things with a grain of salt, right? Because just like you don't know everything, other people probably don't know everything. So they might give you some wrong information on a blog post sometimes. So always dig deep, try to understand what they're mentioning, cross-reference things, read documentation, and then follow a lot of researchers. Microsoft has a lot of public resources on the Microsoft Security Response Center channel on YouTube. So you can find conference talks there. You can find other events like this one as well on that, so that you can learn more from other people and keep going on the security learning journey.
Awesome. Okay. I am excited. I want to move into sort of like a real world example, right? I know one that you worked on recently, and I'd sort of love to hear about sort of like a recent project you worked on, and any sort of unique techniques or anything that was really interesting about this, and kind of what made it stand out for you.
So it's hard for me to talk specifics, right? Because many of the things that I work on are 0 days and active vulnerabilities. But the things that I can probably talk about are the things that are public and very widely known. So if you're familiar with the, for example, EcoLeak vulnerability, that's one Copilot vulnerability that made the rounds in the media. Very public, found by AIM Labs externally. I was one of the people that worked on it internally, and you can see my name on the CV as well. Part of the reason for that is because right before AIM Labs reported that, I actually reported the same vulnerability, and I think it's this the flow of finding that with like a real world example for me was simply because I was looking at the same place they looked. I saw existing reports on both public and private of similar types of data exfiltration. So we had many, like 2 years ago, I would say we had a few reports on data exfiltration using hyperlinks, and those were public. They're in conferences. They were reported, if I remember correctly, by Johannes and also by Zenity, our friends at Black Hat. So I based on those, and I'm like, okay, so how can I take this a step further? Like, why did this thing happen? And then I tried to take it a step further, and then I did basically the same thing that AIM Labs did. I found an alternative parsing for Markdown that rendered the image, and then from there, I worked backwards. It's the same thing that I mentioned before. I get, okay, I have an image, but now I keep getting blocked by this like RAI, responsible AI classifiers and things like, oh, you shouldn't do security on, like you shouldn't be doing attacks on the model, or you shouldn't be making the model print those things. So I work backwards to try to, okay, now I need to bypass these things to make the model print always, like to always work for me so that I can prove the impact. And then from there, now I'm blocked by CSP. So I need to find a CSP bypass similar to what AIM Labs did. So they did essentially the same process I did, I assume, maybe in a different order, but to find a vulnerability. And then in the end, you have a full chain that proves the impact and report to MSRC, which we did. Both of us did. So we both ended up on the credits of that vulnerability, even though it was found independently. So I think that's one interesting example that a topic that I've explored. There are many things to be explored in AI land. There's a lot of things to be built, a lot of things being built already, and not a lot of people looking at it. There are, of course, some people looking at it, but a lot of people work from the safety angle, which, of course, is important. And please, if you find safety issues in Microsoft products, make sure to report to MSRC. Those are welcome. And then we don't have that many security researchers that come from a security background, not a machine learning background, looking into this type of product yet. So if people do look more, I'm sure that there will be interesting findings, and I'm sure our researchers are very capable, so they will be able to find things that haven't been found before. And I'm glad that we have 0 Day Quest, because that's a big incentive, of course, to researchers, and come seeing the campus at Microsoft if you're one of the finalists, if you will, on the 0 Day Quest. So it's a very good initiative, and I think people should leverage it.
Definitely. Yeah. We've you mentioned something interesting. We've seen that a lot. We engage with researchers a lot that work in traditional security spaces, maybe identity, or they do web app testing, and a lot are really hesitant to sort of dip a toe into this new space because it's different, and the incentives, maybe they have an expertise that they've worked on for 10 years. So what, other than sort of these bounty incentives, what other sort of what would you say would motivate researchers that have say a 10-year specialty in a specific niche to say, hey, this is ripe, this is an area ripe so for research? What would you say to sort of incentivize them?
I would say that AI is not that different, in the sense that there's a lot of security research background that can be leveraged into AI research, AI security research as well, in the sense that if you think of an AI system, just think of the input as untrusted and the output as untrusted. Of course, it's probabilistic, which makes it a little harder, sometimes a little more annoying. But the probabilistic aspect of it also can make things harder for the developers to secure. So there's the both sides of the coin there, right? So if you do have, like, let's say 10 years of web application pen test or web application bug bounty experience, the same web application vulnerabilities will exist in AI land. So you don't have to necessarily throw your knowledge away and throw everything you've known away so that you learn about AI. If anything, you're just adding one new element of a vulnerability, right? So one easy example is that in the past, I want to say 5 or 6 years, we've had interesting vulnerabilities on HTTP desync and HTTP smuggling, right? Request smuggling. So that class of vulnerabilities didn't exist until 5 or 6 years ago, and now there's a lot of people doing bounties on it. But people didn't stop finding things like XSS or SSRFs or all the other classes of vulnerabilities, and HTTP desync is still web, right? So it's not different with AI in that sense that you will still find things like XSS or even, I don't know, SQL injections, depending on the system, on AIs. It's just that you will also find new things that you didn't see before, right? So you will find AI-specific issues, and you will have the bit of probabilistic impact on the AI vulnerabilities that you didn't have before. But it's totally transferable. For me, it was a very easy process to learn more and dip my toes into the AI research process. So I assume it will be fairly easy as well. Of course, there are new things to learn, but I think that in security, you should be always learning. So if you want to learn something new, I think now is one of the best times to do that, especially if you have an extra incentives like ZDQ or like the AI bounty.
Definitely. And I kind of see a good place to weave in one of the questions from the chat, and that is, you mentioned CTFs, you mentioned YouTube. Is there any specific recommended resources for somebody wanting to get started? I've noticed that there's more and more sort of like hack the box pipelines showing up for AI security and prompt injection. But do you have any sort of resources or references you found really valuable for people to cut their teeth in the area?
Are you asking about AI specifically or in general?
The question, well, we can start with the question was specifically for AI attacks.
Okay.
And we have some information as well on our MSRC blog about like prompt injection attacks and things like that in our bar. But specifically, if you're somebody wanting to get to transition into the area, what would you recommend?
I think a good place to start is where you mentioned the hack the box pathways, and there's a few, I believe, try hack me pathways as well. A few CTFs are already having some AI challenges. It's a little rare still, and they're mostly focused on things like jailbreaking, but sometimes already there are some other challenges that find things. So you can go to CTF Time if you're not, oh, my light turned off. If you're not familiar with CTF Time is a platform that hosts CTFs and CTF write-ups. So you can go to CTF Time and go to GitHub and try to find AI write-ups on AI challenges, and then go from there, right? So like try to redo those challenges if they're available or if the binary is made available. And if they're not available, just read the write-up, try to learn a little bit. One other resource that is worth mentioning is that MSRC last year did a series similar to this one, right? So one of the presentations in the series was the Microsoft AI Red team teaching a little bit about AI research. They have a lot of resources as well that they have specifically built for teaching people how to upskill in AI research, AI security research. So I think that's a good place to start. And I would say that in general, like, just don't be afraid of trying and understanding the product, because especially if you already have background on security, many things will be kind of straightforward in the sense that just try in a real product. If you're doing bug bounty, like, you have the terms of the bug bounty. If you're following the terms, just try it on Copilot and just try to see what's going on. Try on the competitors as well. There are many AI products out there that you can go and try to dip your toes on and just try to understand how they work, try to understand all the features they have, and then from there, like actually learn as you do security. One resource that I do want to call out specifically, and we can share that later as well, is a researcher called, his nickname is Wonder Woozy from Embrace the Red. He's doing this series that I really liked this month called 20 Days of AI Vulnerabilities. He's publishing, I don't know if it's finished yet, but if not, it's close to finish. He's publishing 20 AI vulnerabilities that he has found with blog posts and write-ups trying to explain how he found them, what are the issues, if the issue has been fixed or not. I believe most of them have, if not all. So that's a good way to learn and get started, is by reading write-ups from others, and then sometimes just doing variant hunting, right? Try to find the same thing that people did find in other places is a good way to quickly find vulnerabilities, because someone else might have looked into it, someone else might not, because sometimes the too obvious is what happens to be what happens like in reality. So
Yeah.
it doesn't hurt, and it's a good way to learn and practice as well.
Very cool. That's funny you mentioned that. During our last ZDQ, we had a researcher that submitted an external submission and said, I'm sure somebody's found this before. It's probably not a big deal, whatever. And it ended up being a critical vulnerability. So it just, if you never know, it's always a good idea to just send it. Yeah.
Exactly. If you report, it's better to receive a duplicate than to. So, sorry, it's better to risk receiving a duplicate than risk not receiving anything. Because if you don't report, you already have the product will remain vulnerable, but then until someone else finds it. But then if you do report, you might end up getting yourself a good like $20,000 bounty. So who knows, right?
Yeah. I'll ask one more question before we turn it over to the primary focus on Q&A for some of the questions that we've had coming in. And it's about looking ahead. So it's a fast evolving space. And is there anything that any topic that you're exploring and you're excited for to move into? I know there's a lot of buzz around agents right now. Even if it's early stage, what's Estevam looking forward to?
I think that agents is a big one, and agents is a big buzzword, right? Everything is a little bit of agents. So I'm gonna go specific, and the thing that I think will be interesting is unattended AI execution. What this means is any AI execution that is not supervised by a human. So essentially, things that automatically run code or automatically run tools or essentially automatically run anything. If they can automatically run something, and that something can be manipulated to give you malicious output or something like that, chances are there will be, or there were, vulnerabilities in there that you can, if you can, like get a malicious input that makes it a malicious output that has security impact, like exfiltrating data or executing arbitrary code, or even a privilege escalation, right? Depending on the agentic identity that is being used. So there's a lot of areas within unattended execution that I think will be very interesting, because unattended execution means you can't have a user say, okay, I agree with this, or like, yes, run this code. So you need to find a solution from the product perspective, but you still need to get that thing to run somehow. And then if you want that to run somehow, you also need to secure it somehow, but that's a hard question, right? So I think that's a space with a lot of opportunities going ahead. There's a lot of companies building stuff like this, and Microsoft is one of them. So there's a lot of agents being built. So help from external researchers is always good as well to help us make sure we're secure. Absolutely.
Awesome answer. Let me catch up on some of these questions here. So I'll go back, and one of the questions from the group is, it's internal to Microsoft, and they said, oh, they didn't know that we had a role called a security software engineer. How did you end up in that role? And did you start as a regular software engineer and transition, or did you just come straight in with the security?
I did come straight into security, but my story specifically is a little funny, because Because I'm from Brazil and I studied in Brazil, I didn't study in the US, I couldn't apply to some, at the time, I couldn't apply to specific roles. So I had to apply to the generic, like new grad or internship ones. At the time, I applied for a generic software engineering role. So I interviewed as a software engineer. But then in all my interviews at Microsoft, I did 5 interviews at the time. All of them, I mentioned something related to security. Some of them I talked related to in the behavioral part of the interview, I talked to the person about security-related concepts, and other I straight up like talked about security. And some I talked about design, of course, because that's part of the interview process, or my projects that I've done that were many in the security area. So because of that, one of the people I talked was at the time a principal engineer in office, and he used to be the manager, not at the time already, but he has been the manager of the office security team. So he basically talked when I came in as an intern, he talked to the current skip manager of the security team, and then I ended up as an intern at the office security team. So I ended up directly in the security software engineering role. Uh, this role is interesting because if you see it externally in the careers page, you will see it as penetration tester. There is a slight difference in the sense that when I joined, those roles were completely separate. Now they've been kind of merged, except not really. But we do pen tests as well. So we do find pen tests. We do go into specific products and we pen test those specific products. But there's the difference point that we help a lot of the teams. We work with teams very closely on designing and threat modeling features securely. So that's the type of responsibility that the role has, right? It's a mix of helping teams and a mix of finding new vulnerabilities and doing security research. Most, of course, of the time that I spend on MSRC related things are related to my security research part of the job. So I'm trying to find new vulnerabilities. But another part of my job, which helps with the security research part, is looking at MSRC cases that come to us. So I can go and learn with what the researchers are submitting to us and help the product team sometimes understand those issues as well, because the person might know their product very well, but they might not have a strong security background. We have a lot of security background people at Microsoft, but it's not everyone. So we need to sometimes explain why a certain issue is bad, or why a certain impact is like actually way higher than the developer thought it would be, and then help them fix the issue in a correct manner as well, so that we don't end up with like 10 different variants one after the other of the case is reported externally, right? So that's obviously good for researchers because they would get the bounty many times, but we want to fix the things properly. And I think that, of course, for a researcher as well, it's good to have a good fix for their bug, right? No one likes to be like finding and talking about the same bug for like a year, waiting and talking to the team back and forth. So we want the fix to be solid. And then that's also part of my job to make sure some of those fixes and the ones I work on are solid fixes, and then going from there into the security research and finding new things as well. Yeah,
that's been essential. Our relationship with our product group, sort of like our security architects, engineers that are embedded within a product team, they are a huge advocate for security by design, and so that's been essential. And that kind of brings up a question that was one of our questions that someone had sent in before. What with your integration and product teams, what are some tips that you could provide external researchers to make their collaboration and submissions smoother from the product team standpoint? We've talked a lot about how to make it easier from the MSRC, the intake standpoint, but once it reaches the product team, what is something our researchers can do to really, with their submissions and with their collaboration, really improve that relationship?
I think making the vulnerability as clear as possible is one of the easiest ways. The ways to do that are many. One is by showing a video, because sometimes in your report, you might not have mentioned a detail that you think was unimportant, but then it turned out to be fundamental to have that vulnerability trigger or not. There are things like specific like details that you need to make sure to have the vulnerability work. So you can share any changes that you made to the environment, if any, because they might be irrelevant, but they might also not be irrelevant. So the more detail you share on how to reproduce the vulnerability, I think is part number one. So making sure the developers can actually reproduce the vulnerability, they can actually see the issue on their end as well, is the beginning of a good report. The second part of a good report is making sure the impact is clear, because in many cases, it is very well understood. If the impact is an XSS, for example, and like let's say the main page, it's pretty obvious because you can then like use that to steal tokens or redirect the page. You can do many other things. To a security person, and that's the caveat, because a developer that might know what XSS is, but they think it's fine in that specific case, they might not realize the impact that that thing has. So if you do have a proof of concept that does get to a point that actually proving the impact. So if you want to say XSS, an XSS is good. It's a good vulnerability. It will warrant a report to MSRC. But if you can spend some time, and of course, you don't want to spend like a lot of time on this, but if you want to spend some time to make a quick JavaScript that steals a token, for example, it's very, very, very easy for a developer to say like, oh, my token is being stolen, so I should fix this like as soon as possible. It helps show how like bad things are to people that are not necessarily security minded. Uh, of course, part of my job is to make sure those impacts are clear, but because we have a high volume of MSRC cases, some things may just go unnoticed, right? Because, or they might go take longer. So like something that the developer could just read and be like, okay, I understand the issue, I go fix it in like a day. It can take like a week for me to like have time to go read the report, and then I read the report, and then I have to go a little back and forth with the developer and try to understand and explain to the developer so that they understand as well what the issue is and why they should fix this as soon as possible, so that the researcher has a faster turnout. So the clearer you make the submission and the clearer you make the impact of that submission, I think are the easiest ways to get a good quality report in, so that we have an easier time to fix the vulnerability. And I think that would be even the part three of the problem is developers also, which might not always be obvious, need time to think about the issues and think about how to fix the issues. So in some cases, that's very simple. It's like a sanitization that was bypassed or something like that, and that's easy. But in many cases, they need to really understand the issue and really understand the system, which takes time. And then they need to come up with a fix, and then they need to run the fix by the security team, and then go forward with that. But if you, as a security researcher, will take you like, let's say 2 lines to say, oh, this could be fixed if you did something like this. It can be wrong, of course, but it can go a long way in helping the developer understand the problem and helping the developer understand the fix. And of course, we have people from MSRC and both engineers and PMs to read the report and be like, okay, that makes sense. I'll just forward this to the developer. And then the developers will go and make the fix. And then in other cases, it might be a little off, and then the developers work a little further and then submit the fixes as well. So I think those things help us clarify the issues and try to understand and go forward with them as easily and as fast as possible.
That's a good answer. Yeah, and you kind of talked about it all comes down to communication, but a lot of what you mentioned also really helps with breaking through some of the severity disparities that the teams have. There's a lot of people involved and trying to really determine the severity of something and how it should be mitigated, how quickly. And the more that you spell out that impact, it just makes it easier and easier for everybody involved to really to understand that severity and align on it. And so we actually have a 0-day quest from last year, which is also on YouTube, about capturing that impact that Estevam mentioned in your report. We have time for a couple more, so I see some coming in from the group. One of the users asks, I sometimes feel overwhelmed by all the material that there is to learn in InfoSec. There's red team, blue team, purple team, AI. What strategies do you use to stay focused and sort of motivated on trying to stay up to date when there's so much information available?
I think that I'm probably not the best person to say this because I try to and like get a lot of the information. So I do have my day job is doing security here, right? So I want to focus on Office products and dependencies that Office products take. So anything that Office directly or is something that we obviously rely on to be secure is the stuff that I really want to focus on. And that's the stuff that I go at and I spend most of my time. So if I like, let's say there's a lot of AI features being built, so I need to be on top of the AI stuff. That's when I would do most of the AI research and try to read all the AI material and try to read blog posts and do things like that. But on my free time, I also want to learn about Windows security. I want to be on top of kernel research and browser research. Of course, I don't have an infinite amount of time, so I try to read here and there. I read blog posts. I do some level of research, but then for me, having some sort of focus on at least a big range of like a range of products helps me like tone down a little bit and try to be okay with not knowing everything about everything, because security is like a really wide topic. It's like kind of like what learning everything about everything in software engineering. It's like straight up impossible. There's no way anyone can do that. And security, I would say it's like even a step further, because you not only need to learn the software engineering, you need to learn what the software engineering didn't know. So the aspects that were missed. So in that sense, trying to focus a little bit on a few either types of vulnerabilities or a few products, like I mentioned in the beginning, help scope down a little bit the learning that needs to be done, and then the learning that needs to be done that versus the one you want to do. I think it's a very different read, because if I'm reading a blog post for something that like I need to understand, I will probably spend more time on it. I read multiple times. I try to analyze like individual sentences to mean like what they to understand what they meant, like on the when they were writing that, what did they actually think about. So that's what I want to do. But then if I'm like, let's say, reading a new V8 fuzzing article or a V8 exploitation on the browser exploiting land, which is not really my field, but it's something I'm curious about, and I do some challenges here and there. I would read faster, and then I would just like try to understand the major points of the blog post or the article, and then keep that on the back of my mind. Then, of course, when I'm doing something like a CTF challenge or I'm going at a specific target that happens to have V8, then I go and fetch those blog posts, try to find that information, and then go deeper into those specific things as I need to do them. And then this helps me also integrate different areas, right? Because if you have an AI agent that uses the browser, can you use that for a browser exploit? I don't know. It's hard, but maybe. Or can you use that for a sandbox escape or things like that? So you do things like intersecting the different areas of research, and then that's when I would go deep into these things that I'm more curious about than the things that I actually need to learn. So I try to understand that I don't know everything about everything, and I think that's an important mindset, especially for people that are starting. You need to do one step at a time and just learn one step at a time as well. Don't try to embrace the world, otherwise you will get overwhelmed and essentially give up in many cases. Some people manage that, but I think that the majority of people, you you can be a little overwhelmed in the beginning, but just go like learn, be better than yesterday kind of thing. Just like try to learn one more thing than yesterday, poke one a little more than yesterday, and then go from there.
That's great. I kind of tend to think along the same lines. I think everyone will eventually settle on almost like a specialty or a lane. There's GRC, red team, blue team, and I think that once you pick your lane, it becomes a lot more manageable. And then just like you, I indulge in my technical curiosity, right? So in all aspects of life, if I have a question pop into my head, I have to go research it, and so I just allow myself to do that in the lanes that might not be my expertise. And so, yeah, I love that answer. So that kind of wraps up our time. Estevam, I just want to say thank you. This has been an amazing conversation. I really love hearing your mindset and your process and your answers. And I think they're valuable for a lot of people. And so I'll turn it over to Lynn to close us out, or Estevam, actually. Yeah, just thank you. Any last minute comments that you have to make?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I want to incentivize more researchers to do research on both Microsoft products and others as well, right? Because we want more people in the industry. We want more people helping secure us and on the good side of the force, if you will, trying to help us and help people be secure. If I know our time here is limited, so if folks have any questions, feel free to reach out on X, Twitter, or even on LinkedIn. My name is pretty easy to find. If you're a security researcher, it will be really easy to find me online. So you can find me in one of those. I think my MSRC also shared my handles on each of their posts, both on LinkedIn and X. So if you want to reach out, feel free. Of course, I can't answer specific things about specific cases, but I'm happy to answer questions about the research process or even public things that you might want some clarification on that if I can't answer, I will direct you to the right folks that might be able to answer.
Awesome. Thank you again.